Good evening. My name is Marge Holtz, and I'm the president of the Lower Keys League of Women Voters, and thank you for joining us this evening for the Lower Keys League of Women Voters presentation of Florida's proposed constitutional amendments. The Lower Keys League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues. I think we've got some sound coming. Major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. This presentation is being conducted on Zoom, and it's being televised on Monroe County Television on Comcast Channel 76 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. It will be available for replay on demand on those two cable providers. If you are joining us via Zoom, you can submit questions via the chat function on Zoom. If you are joining us on television, you can email questions to contact@lowerkeyslwv.org. That's contact@lowerkeyslwv.org. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Joan Wallen, who is the chair of the Lower Keys Voter Services Committee. I get that backwards. And Joan is the chair of the Lower Keys League of Women Voters Voter Services Committee. Joan.
Thank you, Marge. I appreciate the introduction. Well, it's great to be back. 2 years ago, I did this amendments presentation, and here we are in 2020 with a new set of amendments to talk about. Hopefully our goal tonight is to talk to you about the amendments so that when you get to your ballot, there's no surprises, that your eyes don't glaze over, and hopefully you'll even vote on all of the amendments, because that's really important that we see you follow through on that. I want to thank the Monroe County for allowing us to use the Harvey Government Center tonight, and of course Jethan Williams, who is our technical expert for the evening. So without him, we wouldn't really know what we're doing here. So it's really great to have that kind of support for our presentation this evening. So today I'm presenting to an empty room. We're socially distanced, have our masks and all of the good stuff, but unfortunately we aren't able to look you in the eye and talk to you personally and answer your questions spontaneously, but we will get to them at the end. So with that said, I guess we'll turn our attention to the slides, and I will disappear behind the slides. So the good news is we only have 6 straightforward constitutional amendments to consider this year. The last election, we had 12 that were very complex. Some of them had multiple topics even. If you have questions about any of the amendments, you can, as Marge said, enter your question into chat or email them to us, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So your general election ballot includes candidates seeking election to public office, and the League has created an online website called vote411.org, and where you can read about the candidates. We've sent them questions. We've got a little background on each person, and you can look it up. We also won't be covering the candidates today. You'll also find at that website judge retention questions, because a lot of people get their ballot and say, well, who are they? So every 6 years, judges stand for retention. 1 is for the Supreme Court this year, and so you'll also find that at Vote 411. Today, we're focusing on the state of Florida's state constitutional amendments, and we're going to look at a couple Key West referenda. So let's get started. First, I have to get moving on. First, let's have some background. Amendments to the United States Constitution are at the end of the document, and they're numbered, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, etc. But in Florida, our constitutional amendments are embedded into the text of the Constitution. So the amendment's wording, if passed, would be incorporated into the text of the Constitution, or they replace wording already in the Constitution. Citizens can put a constitutional amendment on the ballot in Florida, but the threshold is pretty high. Groups must get signatures from 8% of the number of voters who cast a vote in the last presidential election. That means groups had to collect this year 766,200 valid signatures of registered voters to appear on the 2020 ballot. Usually you collect more so that you have more than enough than you need. And those signatures have to be geographically spread throughout the state, so you can't just collect them in South Florida or up on the Panhandle or in Central Florida. You need to have them spread throughout the congressional districts. That process can cost easily several $1 million. The Florida Supreme Court must also review a ballot amendment to make sure it isn't misleading or combining unrelated issues. Once on the ballot, a supermajority of voters, 60%, must approve a constitutional amendment for it to become part of Florida's Constitution. The first four amendments are citizen initiatives that went through that signature collection process. The last two, 5 and 6, are put on the ballot by the Florida legislature. So let's start with Amendment 1. Oh, no, let's not start with Amendment 1. Back up a minute. I'm a little ahead of myself. Here are some questions I'd like you to think about as I present today. One is, does it belong in the Constitution, which locks it in permanently unless it goes through this process again? So any change has to go back through the voting process. So should it be in the Constitution? Or should the legislature act depending on certain current circumstances? Or should it be under local government control? Is it a home rule issue? So that's one thing to consider. The next is, does it modify existing language in the Constitution? Is it already in the Constitution, and what change would it tweak? The third thing I'd look at is, what's the financial impact? The Florida requires a financial impact statement for each proposed citizens initiative amendment, but not for the legislative initiatives. So there's a little difference there. You'll hear more about it through Amendment 1 through 4, but not 5 and 6. And then you can consider who submitted it, what are their issues. Considering it costs millions of dollars to put an amendment on the ballot, unless the Florida legislature puts it there, why are they doing it? Why spend those millions of dollars? So, and why are they organizations supporting or opposing it? So those are some of the things that we'll go through. So now I am ready to talk about Amendment 1. There we go. Amendment 1 is, my question to ask on this one is why? It's currently, you must be a United States citizen to vote in Florida, period. It's in the Constitution. The Florida Constitution currently says that every citizen of the United States who is at least 18 years of age and who is a permanent resident of the state may register and vote. This amendment would change the Florida Constitution to read only a citizen of the United States. So it goes from every to only. Arizona and North Dakota recently passed similar amendments. The reasoning for this initiative is unclear because passage would make no substantive change to Florida's Constitution. It already limits voting to United States citizens. The financial impact, well, it won't really cost the state anything because it doesn't change anything. Oop. Oh, pardon? Oh, I hit the button too long. That's exciting, isn't it? Okay, a yes vote. Pardon that. A yes vote on Amendment 1 would replace one word, every. Oops, I got to go back again. There we go. Pardon, excuse my error there. It replaces one word, every, to only a citizen of the existing constitutional provision. It keeps the status quo, but in this case, using every, only, if you use the word only, if you vote yes and it becomes only, it's a restrictive word, only citizens. If you vote no to keep the status quo, then it stays every citizen. It's an inclusive way of looking at it. Either way, the result is the same. If you're not a citizen, you can't vote. The sporting organizations, you can see up there, this initiative is sponsored by Florida Citizens Voters. and John Loudon is the national chairman. They raised and spent $2.4 million, and he has not, as of this date, released the donors' names, so we aren't sure who that is part of that. And why they spent the money, since Florida doesn't change anything, we don't know at this point. So supporters say that they want to ensure that elections are preserved for committed citizens of the United States, that non-citizens are prevented from voting now and in the future. So, and critics simply say, we've already got it, so no need. So that's Amendment 1. Amendment 2. See, I'm getting better with that little clicker there. What is a living wage? It raises the minimum wage by doing three things. First, it raises the minimum wage of $8.56 an hour in Florida to $10 an hour as of September 2021. Currently, it is set to go up 9 cents next year. So if this does not pass, it would be $8.65 next year. But if it passes, it would go to $10 an hour. Florida's current minimum wage of $8.56 amounts to $17,800 a year for a full-time worker. The tipped minimum wage currently is $5.54 an hour and is set at the regular minimum wage minus a fixed tipped credit of $3.02. This amendment does not change this credit amount. However, if Amendment 2 passes, tipped workers can expect their hourly wage to increase because this credit is tied to Florida's minimum hourly wage. So, second, it creates the annual $1 increase starting September 30th of 2022 until it reaches $15 in 2026. And third, it establishes a process for subsequent future increases. After reaching the $15, increases would be pegged to the annual rate of inflation. Some large companies have already started increasing starting wages, including McDonald's, Target, Amazon, Walt Disney, and Costco. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and National Employment Law Project, minimum wage workers tend to be 25 and under, female, and people of color. There is a cost estimate for this one. The Florida Division of Elections estimated a higher minimum wage for government workers would cost the state and local governments $16 million during the first year of implementation and $540 million in 2027 when the last raise takes effect. So a yes vote on Amendment 2 would raise income for minimum wage workers above the poverty level over time. It would help reduce race and gender income inequality. It would potentially increase economic activity by increasing household spending. The workers would have more to spend and require small and large business owners to budget for increased payroll expenses. And it would have little or no detrimental effect on job growth, partly due to a higher demand for goods and services, a boost to the economy, and lower employer costs from less employee turnover, according to recent studies. A no vote on Amendment 2 would allow businesses to keep labor costs at current levels. It would avoid potential labor cost impacts on the prices of consumer goods. It would maintain low-paying positions for teenagers and young adults joining the labor market for the first time, and likely it would continue a wage structure that can lead to poverty among younger workers, women, and minorities. Nope. There we have it. Okay, supporters are saying that studies show increasing the minimum wage has little or no detrimental effect on job growth. I believe Washington State, is it Seattle or Washington, has raised their minimum wage to 15. So there is some place that you can look at, see how it's affected the market there. The current minimum wage of $8.56 per hour is not enough money for a person to live on and should be raised over time, according to supporters. And according to the United Way ALICE report, and ALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. In 2018, their report said 46% of households in Florida struggle to make ends meet. The household survival budget for a single adult in 2018 was $24,600, well above the federal poverty level guideline of $12,760, and the Florida current minimum is $17,800. Opponents say that increasing the minimum wage will lead to a consumer price hikes, and it will result in job cuts and reducing hours for employees, in part because small businesses will not be able to afford to pay the increases, or they might be forced to close. Support. There, we got it. Amendment 3, moving on to open primaries. Now, this one's a bit complex, and this amendment proposes to replace Florida's closed primary partisan elections for the, now listen carefully, governor, lieutenant governor, state cabinet, which consists of attorney general, chief financial officer, and the commissioner of agriculture, and the legislature, the House and Senate in the state of Florida, with an open primary in which all voters could vote regardless of party affiliation and or non-party affiliate status, NPA. Now, this congressional, presidential, and local partisan races would not be affected or included in this amendment. It applies only to all state offices. Currently, Florida has closed primaries. Voters must register with a party to vote in a party primary election, and winners of partisan primary elections advances to the general election. Beginning in 2024, if Amendment 3 passes, all candidates would run on a single nonpartisan primary ballot regardless of their party affiliation, and state race primaries would become top 2 primaries in which the top 2 vote getters would advance to the general election. Top 2 is one of about 11 different types of open primaries operating in the United States. How does it work? All candidates for an office would appear on the same ballot for that office. All voters receive the same ballot. Amendment language does not require that a candidate's party affiliation be shown next to their name on the ballot. Not doing so could lead to voter confusion, but the state legislature can pass a law that would allow the party name to appear next to the candidate and correct that. If only 2 candidates qualify to run for an office, the primary would be canceled and those 2 candidates would advance to the general election. The 2 candidates receiving the most votes in the primary would advance to the general election. This could result in 2 candidates of the same party running against one another in the same race in the general election. Over 3.4 million of Florida's nearly 14 million registered voters are shut out during primary elections because they are not affiliated with the 2 major parties. That was my experience when I came to Florida in 2003 as a permanent resident, and I registered as an MPA, non-party affiliate, and I got my first primary ballot and there wasn't any candidates on it. So I only had 1 referendum, I think, so that was it. And I found that if I wanted to be active in the primary elections, I had to designate a party. So young voters, millennials and younger, make up a large segment of those NPA voters. Florida is one of 9 states with closed partisan primaries. Other states that follow the top 2 election system include California and Washington, if you want to investigate further. A yes vote for this would help increase voter participation by allowing those 3.4 million of Florida's voters, registered voters as non-party affiliates, to vote in the primary elections for state legislature, cabinet, and governor. It could potentially lead to fewer minority candidates being elected to serve and represent their constituents in the Florida legislature. It could also potentially result in 2 candidates of the same political party running against one another in the same race in the general election. Potentially, it could produce more competitive state races and attract more moderate candidates to run for office. It also would affect it would require third-party candidates to compete at the primary level to secure a spot on the general election ballot. They would no longer be automatically on the general election ballot. And my favorite is it no longer enables unqualified write-in candidates to trigger a closed primary simply by entering a race for state office in which only candidates of a single party are running. A no vote? That would continue the closed primary system we have today. For the state offices, it would require unaffiliated voters to choose a major party to vote in the primary, and it would retain voters' current ability to elect candidates that more closely reflect and represent the racial makeup of their legislative districts. It ensures nominated candidates conform more closely and consistently with positions held by the two major political parties, and it continues to allow unqualified write-in candidates to trigger a closed primary for state offices. Sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't. We're going to move on to amendment. Well, we're going to go on to who supports it. There we are. The supporting organizations are closed primaries. The supporters say, and you'll see the supporting organizations here, they say closed primaries lead to hyperpartisanship. They also say that it will provide voters access to the broadest slate of the most diverse candidates. It will attract more moderate candidates, and it would likely increase voter participation. And it would discourage candidates from catering to the base of their party. So those are the pro. And now the opposing organizations say that the amendment would eliminate primaries and undo a system set up to prevent political corruption and closed-door deal-making. The top two open primaries will make it much harder for non-white candidates and minor party candidates to win legislative races. So that is what the opposition. Now, the League of Women Voters of Florida, you'll see on that list, conducted a 2-year study on open primaries recently, within a couple of years, and our focus was on whether it would encourage voter participation in elections. We do endorse open primaries, but we didn't identify the top two as our preferred approach. The cost estimate for this one is $5.2 to $5.8 million spread across the state's counties, and I'm assuming it's probably for voter education. If it passed, they would have to explain to voters how to vote in this new open primary. We'll now move on to Amendment 4. There we go, Amendment 4. Now, this one's fascinating, I think. How difficult should it be to amend the Constitution? That's the question I'm asking. It requires that all proposed amendments and revisions to the Florida Constitution be voted on and approved by 60%, our usual supermajority that we have now of the voters, but in 2 consecutive general elections in order to pass. Currently, an amendment becomes part of the Constitution if it reaches 60% on 1 general election. And the 60% majority was put in place in 2006. So that's when the amendment was passed to require the supermajority. If adopted, the Pass Twice amendment would greatly increase the difficulty of amending the Constitution by any means. In particular, the Pass Twice amendment would make it harder to get grassroots citizens-driven amendments passed in 2 elections due to the considerable increase in time and money that they would have to spend campaigning for passage. When you think about it, it takes probably 2 years to get to the first ballot, and then you have to sustain your momentum for 2 more years. It really does make the process more there. Sometimes it likes me, and sometimes it goes flying ahead. Where are we at here? The chart. The beige boxes show the current system where you get your ballot, you get your initiative on the ballot, and the voters 60% voted up, and it goes into effect. If not, it's dead, and you'd have to start from scratch. In the new initiative, of course, it says that amendment would have to pass that second time. So it goes successfully through the first process, and then the second time it has to do it all over again. Now and it has to be in the next general election. That could be a special election that isn't called for the purpose of the amendment, but it could happen within months of the amendment passing, or more likely it would be a full 2 years before it could go back on a general election ballot. So that is the delay there. A vote yes would likely lead to a marked reduction in the number of future amendments added to our Constitution, and it would delay the enactment of a voter-approved changes to the Florida Constitution. It also would add a considerable time and money needed by citizen groups to successfully pass voter-driven initiatives. Remember that Amendment 1 was a simple one, and it's 2.4 million, and now you double the amount of time. It's going to significantly increase the amount of money needed. Significantly limits voters' ability to amend their Constitution and to act as a check on the legislature when it fails to pass laws that are important to citizens or when it passes laws that are unfavorable. Now, a no vote would retain the less restrictive process for citizens to pass the legislature by amending the Constitution through direct democracy, and it maintains the existing pathway for citizens, 60% of their voters' approval in a single election. Now, who's for and against it? The supporting organization is Keep Our Constitution Clean and the Florida Chamber of Commerce. A supporter, Jason Zimmerman, who is an attorney for the initiative sponsor, Keep Our Constitution Clean, said, quote, "By doing it twice, we think we can reduce the amount of whimsical amendments." Opponents say pass the amendment twice, if adopted, would add more of a burden to an already expensive and difficult process. And they also say that the passage would provide well-funded corporate interests a second chance to defeat publicly popular amendments that initially pass. So say you pass something like an environmental issue and corporations decided that they opposed it. It would give them 2 years additional time to beat it down the second time. So it's really a burden to the direct democracy process. Having said that, we got 4 down. Those are the citizen initiatives that we've gone through. And now we're going to move on to the 2 the legislature put in place. The first one deals with, well, actually, they both talk about homestead exemptions. How long should you need to make the transfer of your homeowners, Save Our Homes benefit for the, that's the question at hand. It increases from 2 years, the current number of years that it exists, to 3 years, and that's the period of time the homeowners have to transfer their Save Our Home benefits from a prior home to a new home. The difference between a home's adjusted value and the appraised value is the Save Our Homes benefit. So the Save Our Homes amendment of the state's constitution was approved by voters in 1992 and went into effect in 1995. And this amendment places a limitation of 3% on all annual assessment increases on homestead properties. Currently, when a Florida resident moves, they have 2 years to transfer their Save Our Home benefits to a new primary residence. The proposed change fixes a potential pitfall for portability because homestead exemptions take effect on January 1st. That means that the sale of a home late in the year, say in December, would effectively reduce the portability for from 2 years to a little more than a year and a few days or a couple weeks. So a yes vote helps homeowners who sell their home late in the year by following more time to transfer their Save Our Homeowners benefit to or home benefit to a new home, and it reduces property tax revenue, but it does reduce property tax revenue for funding local schools and other services like police, fire, and infrastructure, because we are talking property taxes here. It limits the ability of local governments to control their budgets based on county needs, and it amends a tax law to the Florida Constitution, making it difficult to alter in response to changing or emergency economic conditions. In other words, it's locked into the Constitution rather than a law. And a no vote on Amendment 5 would maintain the current Save Our Homes exemption, the 2-year portability period, which begins January 1st of the calendar year. And so it maintains the status quo, and it would not impact the current level of property tax revenues for funding local services. Now, who's with us? Now, again, this was proposed by the legislature, so they're our supporting organization, and the League of Women Voters is opposing it, and on the basis of home rule, that the property taxes are levied by local county governments to pay for local programs and services, and so they feel that is a decision that belongs in home rule. Moving on to the last amendment. Amendment 6. This one allows a homestead property tax discount to carry over to the surviving spouse of a deceased veteran with permanent combat-related disabilities. This discount would take effect on January 1st of 2021, the coming year, and remain in effect until the spouse either remarries, sells the home, or disposes of the property, except under certain conditions. Currently, the homestead property tax discount for veterans expires upon their death and is not extended to their spouses. Extending the discount would help disabled veterans' spouses keep their property taxes lower. The homestead exemption benefits have been improved for veterans 3 times in recent years, and each time reducing tax revenues. A yes vote on Amendment 6 would extend additional tax relief to surviving spouses of deceased veterans who were permanently disabled by combat-related injuries. It would reduce property tax revenues available for funding local schools and other services like police, fire, and infrastructure. And being in the Florida Constitution makes it difficult to alter in response to any changing or emergency economic conditions. And it limits the ability of local governments to control their budgets based on county needs. A no vote would maintain the status quo and continue the policy of discontinuing additional property tax relief for surviving spouses of deceased veterans who were permanently disabled in combat-related injuries. It would then not impact the current level of property tax revenue for local services, and it would preserve local governments' control over their county budgets and preserve the ability of county governments to efficiently respond to current and future community needs. And of course, the supporting organization is the Florida legislature that originated it, and the opposition, you can see, is once again the same as with Amendment 5, that the League is concerned that it is infringing on home rule and that it limits the ability of local governments to manage their budgets. So those are the 6 amendments to the Florida Constitution. And next, I'm going to briefly cover a couple Key West ballot measures. Key West voters have 4 referenda on our ballot. 3 deal with cruise ships, limiting the number of there's 3 dealing with cruise ships. Let me try to be clear here. 1 limits the number of disembarking passengers to 1,500 per day. The second one limits the size of the cruise ship to no more than 1,300 passengers. And the third gives priority to cruise lines with the best environmental and health records. If you want to watch a debate on those three issues, I'm not going to go into them tonight, but if you want to watch a debate, a hometown website, hometown Key West website, did a 30-minute debate at their September 21st forum. And you can vote yes, yes, yes. There are 3 referenda. You can vote no, 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 or you can vote yes, no, no, yes, whatever you decide. But that's one way you can educate yourself if you have more questions on it. I saw the debate. I think it was very good debate. So that would be my recommendation. Our 4th amendment in Key West is placed there by the Key West City Commission. And it assumes that let's assume that Key West suffers an emergency, perhaps a hurricane hits us, and it needs emergency funding to make repairs as quickly as possible. Under current law, the City Commission must ask Key West citizens to vote on that at their next election. Now, under this proposal, if we so we're talking about bonding here, to issue bonds to address the impact of emergency. So that's something. And we also were talking about funding sources. The Commission wants to use funding sources other than property taxes to repay the bonds. We'll get there. So a yes vote on this one. Under this proposal, in an emergency, the City Commission could authorize emergency funding using city funds like parking, various fees the city collects, rent on city property, FEMA assistance and other government loans and grants, and other non-property tax sources. It would require, if they decide to do it, a supermajority vote of the commissioners, so that it would have to be a supermajority. But a no vote keeps the status quo and delays action until a vote can be taken by the community, whenever their next general election would be. So that is the City of Key West referendum. So let's turn to voting, getting ready to vote. That's what I want to end my discussion with tonight. And we've covered the ballot issues. Marge is monitoring questions, and when I finish this next section, we'll take your questions in a couple minutes. But I want to talk to you a moment about getting ready to vote and highlight some very important matters. First, I want to recognize our County Supervisor of Elections, Joyce Griffin. She and her staff are doing an outstanding job, and we are in great hands. All 3 ways to vote are safe in Monroe County. There is no doubt about it. But you need to remember a couple important things to be sure your vote counts and that you don't make a mistake. Joyce Griffin says that she has mailed out over 22,000 vote-by-mail ballots and have been already sent out, and there's more going out daily. And they must be returned to the Supervisor of Elections office, _office, by 7 p.m. on November 3rd. That does not mean mailed, postmarked, but it must, or brought into a polling place, and assuming you can just drop it off already marked, you must bring it to her office. It must be in her office. And we recommend you mail your ballot no later than 2 weeks before that deadline, which would make it, you need to mail it about October 13th. Remember, you must put extra stamps on your mail-in ballot, vote-by-mail ballot. That's 3 stamps on the ballot, and you need to sign it the same way you did when you registered to vote. Most vote-by-mail ballots are rejected for those 2 reasons. Either a signature doesn't match or it arrived too late to be counted, and that would be just a shame to have that happen here in Monroe County. So you sign it the same way you did when you registered to vote. So if you used your middle initial when you signed your name, I signed my Joan C. Wallen, then you must sign the ballot the same way. I can't just sign Joan Wallen. I have to use that Joan C. Wallen in order for the ballot to be valid. And also, please, please don't scribble your name in haste. It needs to match your registration and be legible. So you can track your ballot at the Supervisor of Elections website, Once you send it in, you can look at our website and it'll tell you ballot received, and once it's been counted, it will say counted. I highly recommend voting early. I did it in the primary election. It was very efficient, very safe, and it begins October 19th at 5 locations throughout the Keys, including one here in Key West at 530 Whitehead Street, and you can early vote at any of the sites there. And there will be a drop box. This is the new thing this year that I'm very pleased to see. And it's a drop box at each early voting site where you can turn in your vote by mail ballot. Drop it in the box, no need for postage. And those are available during business hours at the 3 supervisor of election offices in Key West, Marathon, and Key Largo. During early voting, starting on the 19th, the drop box is going to be available at all 5 sites, including Big Pine Key Community Park, which is at the end of Sands Road, and Islamorada Branch Library. And those early voting sites are open from 8:30 to 5 p.m. Then the early voting drop box is brought inside each night at all of those locations and secured for the evening, and the ballots removed each night. And so early voting ends October 31st. If you do choose to vote on November 3rd, you must vote at your assigned precinct based on your address. The League's online voter guide, Vote 411, can tell you where that is and also give you the information on candidates and judge retentions. So those are the various ways you can vote, and I want to reiterate and underscore, however you decide to vote this fall, please be sure to pay attention to these dates and deadlines. While October 5th is the last day to register to vote, it is also a good time to check your voter registration status, or if you've become disabled in a way that would affect your signature and it wouldn't be the same any longer, you can also change your signature on file. So think about it just as a time period where you should make sure you're ready to vote and everything's properly organized for that. If you decide to vote by mail, remember to request and mail in your ballot early. While October 24th is the deadline for requesting a vote by mail ballot, that's really getting kind of too late. And we really recommend highly that October 13th is when you would place it in the mail, or early voting, drop it in that drop box. And it must reach the Supervisor of Elections office, I keep saying that word office because it's important, by 7 p.m. on Election Day. It can't be just postmarked. And if you choose to vote on the day of Florida's general election, Tuesday, November 3rd, you must be in line to vote at your designated precinct by 7 p.m. Please, please don't miss these deadlines, and you just get it done as soon as possible. Get it done now. So, last thing I want to say is check out vote411.org. You can go with your laptop, your phone, your tablet. Go in there, enter your address. You can register to vote. You can check your voter registration and see what precinct you're in. And then we've put biographical information about the various candidates, links to their websites if they have them, and we've asked them a few questions that you can read their responses and think about it. You can make your own sample ballot that you can take with you to the polls or just have on hand, and some of that information is also available in Spanish. And if you're wondering who will be on that November 3rd general ballot, visit vote411.org, and you'll see judges, the judge retention, which often I don't know who those people are, and we have that all explained out there. We also have more ballot information out there, and so it's a real great place to go for any of your voting needs for wherever you are. Again, as Marge said, the League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. We do not align ourselves with any political parties, but we are a political organization in that we believe that good government means an educated and active citizenship. And so educating the public on is the basis of good governance and getting that electorate ready to vote. So we thank you so much for your time and your patience. And now, Marge, questions.
you have done such a superb job. We have no questions.
Oh, it's a miracle.
But as a reminder, this is available. This is being broadcast or televised on Comcast Channel 76 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99, and is available for replay on demand. I'm sure you'll have questions when you have a chance to think about it a bit, but you can contact us via email, and the email address is up on your screen, or will be. It's contact@lowercaseLWV.org. I'll say it one more time, contact@lowercaseLWV.org. You can submit questions there, and we will get back to you and be happy to answer them. Thank you for attending. Thank you for being so patient with a complicated procedure. And vote. Please vote.
Please.
Good
Thank
evening.
you.